Hello everyone, my name is Con Kakanis from Sundata, Managing Director. Sundata is a provider of IBM Power services and products in the Australian marketplace. And we welcome you here today to have a panel discussion with a couple of guests around IBM Power systems and the options that exist to consume that service in the cloud environment in Australia. So I'd like to introduce Brian Smith, who's a Senior Business Systems Analyst at Penske Power Systems. David Cole from Sundata. Brian looks after applications, infrastructure, and keeps the whole show running for the primary application that Penske uses. And David is an IBM Power Systems Specialist at Sundata and has helped a lot of clients with their power solutions. The reason that we brought the panel together is that we do see in today's environment lots of options for clients around on-premise, pure cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud type solutions. And most of that conversation tends to relate around Windows workloads and Linux workloads. Now, there is a substantial user base of IBM Power clients in Australia using IBM i and their applications that have served them well for many, many years. And there's not a lot of content available for people considering their options as to how to deploy their IBM solution. So for that reason, we've got Brian to give us a user experience. Penske has used cloud services for their power applications for 6 years now. And again, David has helped many clients through this conversation. So as I said, Penske has been a long-term user of IBM i on-premise for many years, and then for the last 6 years as a consumer of cloud services. Brian, if I could ask you as a starting point, if you go back to when Penske was considering the options to go to a cloud model for IBM Power application workloads, would you mind taking us through the sort of thinking that was going on when you were considering on-premise versus cloud and sort of the decisions that came to pass?
So for Penske, as you were saying previously, we were a on-premise solution for our I-Series. It was working adequately fine for us at that time. However, we were acquired by an American-based company, and for their SOX compliance, one of the key factors was to basically take away any risk from the business from having that as an on-premises solution. They were definitely directing us towards a cloud-based solution that would both improve the security but also then improve the performance, whilst also being cost-effective for us. When we went to tender, we specifically at that time, we looked at 2 different vendors who were offering a cloud-based I-Series solution for us. Sundata was one of those 2 clients. And we definitely, of course, like all companies, cost was definitely a factor in our decision-making process. But we also then considered the reliability of the service. And particularly, we had probably a stronger focus than most at that time, specifically around wanting local support and expertise for our solution. I think historically, most people who use IBM solutions know that uptime is a very strong factor in why we use them, because they are extremely reliable, and a lot of the businesses that operate them are 24 hours or very close to a 24-hour business. So we need to make sure that our application is available at all times. And by moving to a cloud-based solution, definitely opened us up to looking at different ways that we could make sure that the system was available for longer periods of time, but still ensuring that we were performing regular backups and just overall getting better performance from our system that we could possibly afford to do if it was on premise.
Brian, you touched on the 24/7 requirement. Your solution includes a HA component using Linux.
That's right.
Comment on your experience on that whole HA world of configuration, testing, actual outages. It's a combination of a cloud solution and a third-party provider.
Okay. Well, actually, I'll step back a little bit, just a little bit from that, and just you talk about our application availability. When we had the solution on premise here, our business hours were primarily from about 4 o'clock in the morning, as we had a New Zealand business entity who would be coming online around that time, and we would generally be consistently trading until about 7 p.m. of the evening. That's quite significantly changed, and even more interestingly, it's changed quite a bit with COVID. Our business hours, basically, because of the amount of split shifts that we basically have the application available from about 3:30, 3 a.m. early morning, which is partly for New Zealand, but also we have businesses here in Australia that are coming online that early now, and we have the application available until about 1:30 a.m. Queensland time, before we actually start performing the end of day processes and backup. And again, that's primarily for our Perth business, who also uses the same iSeries. And that gives us an extremely broad breadth of time availability that we require our system to be available for before we are taking it down for the daily maintenance type processes. That's been an interesting challenge, and it's something that Sundata has assisted us with greatly in ensuring that we were able to tighten our end-of-day process and actually perform the backups that we still require for compliance, and getting it done in a much tighter time frame. Now, from a cloud-based solution perspective, our primary database is located in a cloud-based solution out of Brisbane, and our HA backup is based in Sydney. The HA solution is basically an exact replica of our production system as far as, I think, size and performance are concerned. David, you can confirm if that is correct. So with that HA system, essentially it is replicating live. Every transaction that's processed through our production system is immediately replicated through to HA by a matter of seconds. It's out by. To date, we perform annual testing, including HA failovers, to our Sydney office to check things such as performance, response time. We ensure that the data has integrity and we can confirm its content. We also confirm then that we have a lot of additional systems that connect to our iSeries, so we also confirm that those are working adequately when we do a failover test. Beyond our failover testing, we were fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, to actually have a real failover in the 6 years that we've been using this solution. Only one so far, and that went incredibly well for us. It was an unexpected failure due to a hardware issue, and we made the decision early in the evening to fail over to our HA system. It was educational for everybody because it was our first true real test of what it would be like in a real situation. And thankfully, it actually went extremely well. We were able to switch over. We performed a full day of trading on the HA system. We had 0 data loss, which was an exceptional result for everybody. And no one even noticed any performance issues. There were some minor problems in network drives that we had missed in our validation of the high availability system, which caused a few minimal problems for that one day. But again, it's very educational, and that's how you pick up with these problems. And thankfully, we were able to switch back from the high availability system back to the live system the following evening, and we've had no issues since. It's definitely something that's given us an opportunity to, for future failover tests, to give us a lot more confidence in knowing how our business operates, and also knowing what information to ask for from our developers, so that if they are making significant system changes, which Penske does do, then we know exactly what questions to ask for, so that we're always aware of how our high availability system could be affected by those changes. So it's always about being on the front foot.
Yeah, I do recall that outage, Brian, and I think one other complexity is that your Windows workload is primarily on premise, while your IBM iSeries is in the cloud, and so the integration during failover and making sure that the whole Windows domain comes across and is integrated to the HA system.
Yeah.
And that was the benefit of all the testing, the failover testing that had been done prior. That it was as I do remember some people who lost a bit of sleep that weekend, but apart from that, it was pretty seamless.
Yes, and I'm sure everyone remembers the fact that I didn't lose any sleep because I accidentally slept through the alarm.
Oh, well.
Oh, well, which, as we've often joked about, it's actually proved to be a very positive thing because whilst the decisions were made, I was able to rest. So then the next day I had a very big day in the office, and it proved well because I was able to keep everyone going and not be at wit's end. And it's actually been quite an educational experience, I think, for everybody in the business after that.
I do recall that everybody thought we could run on adrenaline forever, but apparently that runs out after about 36 hours, and then people start fading. Sorry, David.
Yeah. The experience that we saw with the role swap or switch to Sydney was the testing that we do on a regular basis with Penske is conducted hand in hand with their Intel and networking team, and scenarios are mapped out and fully documented. And the rigorous testing that we do proved itself when we most needed it.
And I'll quantify that too. Because we do annual testing for compliance purposes, our annual failover testing, we pretty much have it all done consistently now in under 2 hours from end to end. So that's a testament too of the documentation and the quality of that documentation. We actually hand over a failover test now to people who've never done it before and allow them to actually have the experience, almost like a baptism of fire. We just basically all sit off our keyboards and allow someone else without the experience to actually go through the steps, make sure they can understand it, and still we're getting in under the 2 hour for a failover. And I think for anyone in business who'd be sitting there saying, if we had a major outage, 2 hours is an incredibly short period of time to know that you can be back up and trading again.
Thanks, Brian. David, I might ask you, like you obviously talk to a lot of different organisations similar to Penske. What's your observation on how people are looking at their power system I workloads and sort of deciding on-premise versus a cloud option?
Yeah, well, it's a topic that everyone's looking at, and quite often you find that companies need to have a cloud strategy, whether that's just we need to have a cloud strategy to tick the box to say we've got one, or they're just looking at it as an alternative. As you mentioned earlier, Con, people talk about cloud and the default is Windows or Linux type workloads, but when we get to these sort of business critical niche environments like IBM I or AIX running on the power systems, it becomes a much different conversation. So most clients are looking at the option of cloud and then just comparing what's the best fit for them, because quite often we find that it's not necessarily is it the cheapest option, it's more what's the best fit for the business. So Brian's been involved with Penske and the predecessor for quite some time. We've seen, they actually moved from being, having almost a private cloud managed service that was deployed by themselves for other business units within the group before Penske bought the heavy vehicle part of that business. So they've transitioned from internal and operating for businesses on a private cloud environment through to now outsourcing and having their business run on the Sundata cloud. So it's something that we see quite often. Some of the thoughts are obviously cost is important, as Brian mentioned earlier. Data center space is quite often important. Some people, where their business is located is not an ideal IT center due to, comms and power issues. Also, just availability of staff. Most people don't want to invest in administration staff. They'd rather spend money on people who can add value to the business, like applications, etc. So if they can have somebody else manage that for them, then that's giving them better value to the business. We also see a lot of clients talk to us around, I guess, non-traditional workloads for IBM or AOX on Power, which might be a proof of concept. So we do see some short-term subscriptions to the cloud just to prove. One customer of note was running a 20-year-old system on a 15-year-old operating system, and so we used our cloud to run a proof of concept across multiple software layers to bring them up to a current operating system level, so they could then consider their options of either cloud or on-premise with current technology. We also see a lot of archive workloads coming to the cloud as well, where people may have transitioned off their IBM application, but they need to retain that information in the application, the historical and legal purposes for 7 years generally, and we can just park that on a cloud subscription service and just have the small number of users accessing it as required, and then the cloud gives that great flexibility in that we can then start reducing the capacity for that workload as the business use diminishes over the years, and that can give a cost saving over time.
Thanks, David. I'll come back to you, Brian. One thing you alluded to was the number of partnerships that you have. So you've got IDS for applications on the iSeries. You've got Sundata ourselves as your IBM cloud provider. Mimics for the HA software. Windows or Intel applications providers, and then you've got that whole sort of like security layer as well. What would you suggest to people who are sort of like considering having a hybrid solution where some of their services are coming from the cloud and some are on premise, different third parties? What would you see as advice that you give to people who are considering moving into that world, and sort of what lessons did Penske learn over the last few years in terms of optimizing that environment?
Something interesting that's probably worth knowing in this regard is my background. So I'm actually not from a IT background. I'm actually an accountant by trade, is my skill set. So technology is definitely not something that I'm strong in, but I have a very quick acumen to learn it. So with that, I think that speaks a lot of volume to me or to us about our reliance on our external vendors for that skill and expertise. We're always looking for the best of what we can achieve for both the business and also for our partners. So again, like you were saying, for Sundata, they offer us our cloud solution for our iSeries. And our developers, we have no developers for our actual application in-house. That's all performed by Pentana for us. So they, in those two regards, basically what we often are looking for and wanting is for people who are able to always be aware of the best and the latest technologies that we can leverage off for our business. And be able to come to us with ideas of ways that we might be able to fix something when we have a new problem that we need to come up with. So that's where, when I look specifically at Sundata, I think about speed and performance of the iSeries. General maintenance has been another one where Sundata have come to the party and assisted us greatly in how we can improve our overall performance, including things such as backup times and how we can rearrange the backups to be more efficient for us based on the fact that we have multiple companies on the database and we're able to split those backups over time. I also think about the fact that Sundata was able to go out to the business world. And with their knowledge, you basically partner with security companies to provide us with some of the world-class quality security for our I-Series. These were all things that we didn't have prior, but we looked at and went, well, these are definitely things that we want to be able to achieve. We want to make sure that we have some of the best security for our database and for our customers' information, and that knowing that we have a good relationship with Sundata too, it's also able to give us the ability for expandability. So, David, you were talking there about how you can offer a cloud-based solution for a company that might be phasing out their I-Series type solution, and they want that for that 7-year gap. Whereas for us, we have regular meetings with Sundata, which are really great for us. They give us, it's quite funny, they give us an opportunity to step back from the business. And for a brief moment, we're able to sit there and go, okay, what's coming? What else do we have to think about for the future of our business? And often, we will often have these, oh my God, moments where we realize that we've got another major project coming up, and that's going to require us to create a new environment on the development box, where we're able to, fill it up with another company with information and get that there sitting there available. And by having those regular meetings, we're able to then sit down and very quickly discuss, do we have enough space? Do we know when we want to do this? And how quickly we want to be able to get this up and running and get users onto it. And knowing that and actually having those regular discussions and talking about our business and talking about where we see ourselves in 1 month, where we see ourselves in 6 months, it's definitely a good way of being able to constantly remind ourselves, okay, we are a very active company and we're always wanting new things, and our business is definitely hungry for change all the time. So yeah, working with Sundata has definitely helped us to be able to always be thinking ahead, I think is probably the simplest way of putting it. And yeah, and then also like things like local knowledge and response times are probably pretty important for us as well. When we do have even a small problem on the I-Series or a simple question, there's nothing worse than if you had to rely probably on someone outside of Australia, because pretty much any response time you're going to get will be overnight, and potentially then even longer, depending on how strong your relationship is with the vendor. Sundata's knowledge, we're generally able to get a response same day, and then for more complex ones, we'll usually get follow-up overnight as well. But again, that's extremely rare situations where they don't already know the solution to whatever we're looking for on the spot, which is great.
Obviously, we have our monthly meetings, and it was a good point that you raised. It's that opportunity for you to step back from your day-to-day workload to think more proactively, and those meetings allow us to, I guess, be on the front foot to not necessarily respond to issues as they arise, but get ahead of the game, and we proactively work with Penske and also Pentana as the software developer to make these changes out and plan them incredibly well. And it's a three-way partnership.
The observation I'd have across lots of customers, we have a sort of a spectrum between clients that want us to be purely reactive, and they don't want to talk to us unless something goes wrong. And we have other clients, basically like Penske, where it is about being proactive. The forums that we share is an opportunity for us to ask questions that might be provocative, it might be disruptive, but I guess as under the Penske identity, it's been about 6 years, but our relationship with the organisation goes back to Western Star trucks of the 1990s. So it's been a very long-term relationship. We've got enough insight to ask some questions. I guess it's always about appropriate questions and appropriate context, but they're very productive outcomes. And, we all talk about prevention being better than cure, but in this case, we are able to put it into practice.
Context, Con, you mentioned, it's a great word because it allows us to understand what's this issue actually mean to the business. So it's not just, there's an error on the system or something's changed, but actually knowing what that means to the business, either in reacting to a condition or planning.
I guess the other thing that I would just inject here for the audience's benefit, the name Penske is a global brand, and its heritage is in motorsport, or certainly its public persona is in motorsport, and it's one where coming first, winning is a big deal, and to varying degrees, people buy into the motorsport side of things, but certainly people do buy into performance and optimizing how the system supports the business. And I think that's something that has coloured the relationship. And certainly, Brian, we can see it in every engagement we have with you guys. It's all about doing the best that's possibly able to be done. And that certainly flows through to ourselves and the other third parties that we know work with you guys to get the best possible outcome for the Penske power system. David, you, as I said, you talk to a lot of other clients. What are there any other sort of considerations that people are bringing up with you when it comes to considering this question about, do we put our power workload in the cloud? Brian mentioned compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley, governance, security is obviously top of most people's minds for the last few years. What sort of other anecdotes have you got for what people have seen in that sort of world when they're making their decisions about on-premise versus cloud?
I guess probably the other critical one, other than some of the things that Brian mentioned and I mentioned earlier, is just that capability of being able to say, right, we just run an application and we don't need to know anything else. So organisations get the value out of the application, not from the piece of hardware sitting behind it. And if they can just run the application as a service, and then we manage all of the infrastructure behind it and remove all the complexity, just to make sure that the application works as best as it can and is available for as often as it can, and be resilient with things like the high availability tools and backups, etc. That's a critical piece to operations. Companies aren't looking at investing money in those sort of back end IT requirements. Everyone's got them, but there's better ways to achieve the goals. As I said earlier, the investing in applications is where businesses get value.
Thanks, David. Brian, I just sort of heading towards winding up here, I might just ask you, for the rest of the business outside of IT at Penske, would they articulate any benefits to how you've run your power workloads for the last 5 or 6 years, or is it something that's totally invisible?
I think the business has definitely seen in the last 6 years we've seen a large move away from, and it's silly to say this, we've seen a large move away from paper-based tech as a company, particularly with part of the Penske acquisition. Electronic transmission of documentation, electronic transmission of files has increased exponentially. That's something that's definitely been a big part of our iSeries structure around ensuring that basically all output from the iSeries is electronic now rather than to printers. Our most common printers that we have here are now wireless barcode printers for our picking of our product. Actually, that's a good point. I'm going to bring something up in a moment. That's been probably one of the larger ways that the business notices how our iSeries operates, is that uptime and the complete lack of issues, I guess we would say. Previously, when it was on premise, we would often find some of the subsystems were failing more often, and that was also because we had internal support, where we were relying on our own internal expertise, whereas being able to transition that to external parties, in a way we're able to hold our external parties like Sundata more accountable then to help us understand what our problems are and identify when we do have things like comms issues. So in a way, we're kind of being mean to you and making you guys work hard for your money, which is good.
Yep. Look, it's from our perspective, it drove us towards automation for a lot of that management of uptime, monitoring, alerts, all of those things, so that we actually get in front of a problem rather than getting a phone call from the client at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning when people can't do something with the system. We actually know about it generally at 3 a.m. on a Sunday when the things actually had an issue. So it's been a sort of like a virtuous relationship in that, you know, the demands that you guys put on us in moving to a cloud solution, governance, performance, security, general hygiene of the system, communication back to you, all of these things set a bar that we were happy to meet. And it's, you know, I guess we've encouraged each other to continue to find ways to improve the availability and reliability of that system. I know that most organisations around the world who run this IBM iSeries Power platform, one of the things they all struggle with is getting hold of expertise to run the environment. That's not a common skill set. And the other question is about, you know, is the roadmap something that we can build our business strategy around? And I guess one thing that I've seen with the relationship with Penske is that we've taken that resourcing issue away from Penske. You don't have to think about, can I get people who know how to run this system? Because that's our job and that's contracted. And also because of our relationship with the IBM side of it, you know, the roadmap about what's coming down the track. We have another client running power systems. We recently shared with them the IBM Roadmap out to 2028. So they can invest with confidence knowing that IBM's committed investment in the platform at least that far. So there are a few other things that we sort of see in this sort of context in terms of delivering a very reliable solution. As I think you put your finger on it, a system that's invisible to management is a good system.
Absolutely. They don't want to be annoyed when the thing goes down. They just want to make sure, they just want to know the fact that it's operating 24 hours, and that's pretty much what we guarantee them these days. We don't really have any major issues. And again, when we do have more minor issues between myself and the Sundata team, generally speaking, I can respond to any form of error that we have, resolve it there on the spot through the solutions that Sundata have given us. And then I'm able to simply escalate those back to the Sundata help desk, and I'm usually getting a response back within the same day, essentially always the same day. And then from there, you know, I can get back to focusing on what the business is meant to be doing. And being an accountant by trade, I don't want to be dealing with computer issues. That's the least of my problems.
Fair enough. David, as we wind up, is there anything else that you'd like to add in before we conclude?
I guess one of the other benefits that we've seen with Penske and other hosted clients as well on our cloud is one of the things that most likely drops off the priority list is keeping systems current. So regular patching and maintenance under the cloud and the managed service that we do for Penske and other clients, where we're essentially ensuring contractually that the machines and the operating systems and the firmware on the hardware are up to date. It's critical for all businesses to keep things current from a support perspective, but also from a risk mitigation perspective. And things like, you know, Penske being right about a $30 billion global entity, SOX compliance, all the audits and compliance that we go through, and Sundata also get audited by the Penske auditors for our security. But having those systems up to date, and it's a regular, repeatable platform of work that we do, just ensures that we're mitigating risk associated with either security exposures, vulnerabilities, or just support issues if we didn't need to make a call to IBM. And first response is you're not up to date on your operating system. So we find that contractually, that it just happens. Obviously, it's scheduled work, but there's a big difference between what we see with our contracted customers as opposed to those on an ad hoc basis. It's very easy to fall behind very quickly because it's just not seen as a priority.
Yeah.
I think we could probably say prior to the Penske acquisition, this company hadn't really done any major maintenance upgrade work on their I-Series for many years, many. We were vastly behind. And one of the very first things we did when bringing ourselves across to Sundata's cloud solution was bringing ourselves up to the most current release. We perform full quarterly system saves to our I-Series, again, for compliance purposes. But part of that process of doing that save is we also are then looking for any PTF updates and ensuring that our systems are up to date. And again, talking about partnering, whenever there are new PTF updates, we are alerted to those by Sundata. We then pass those PTF updates across to Pentana, who are the developers, to confirm that they are not aware of any issues. So it's actually also ensuring that they're keeping up to date on their I-Series, which is where they do our development work, to ensure that they're keeping themselves up to speed with the latest tech as well, and with the latest updates and security upgrades, which are important, not just for us, but to ensure that our developers are also, our development house is keeping up to date as well and aware of what's going on out there.
Yeah, that's a critical piece, Brian, in that obviously we've got an external application support partner, Pentana, who have their own instances for your development environment. We have patching that's agreed to with those guys. We also then promote that through your UAT environment, and then they get deployed out through production and HA. So it's quite a rigorous planning exercise, and then through to implementation. But obviously you want to keep all layers on the same platform levels.
Absolutely.
And that's that we find that's planned out incredibly well.
So one of the ironies of the platform we're talking about is its reliability means that we often come across clients that have got systems that are 7 or 8 or 9 years old, and they're still running a business. In the case with Penske, it's a very vital part of your business, so that compliance and side has just meant that that variable about having out-of-date systems has been taken out of the equation, and the overall risk to the business has been reduced. So I might take this opportunity to conclude our conversation there. I'd like to thank Brian Smith from Penske Power Systems and David Cole from Sundata for joining me today. Thank you for your insights, Brian, and David, your perspective. I hope as an audience that you've enjoyed the conversation and that you've obtained some value from it for your own considerations in your own business. Thanks very much.